Bismillah, Islam, Rasulullah. Welcome all of you to an experience sharing session on class interaction. My name is Syed Arshad Raza and I am from MIS department. My today's talk's objectives are to establish the role of instructor in the class, and then in the second part I would like to share my experience on class interaction. So in the first part I would like to actually emphasize what an instructor is supposed to do or what kind of role he is supposed to play inside the class, and then what I have done so far throughout my experience over here for about 4 years inside University of Dammam teaching at MIS department. Now there is a well-known saying of Galileo Galilei that you cannot teach a man anything, but you can only help him discover it within himself. So when I looked at this particular saying of Galileo, I thought that, is this gentleman not telling us about something which we usually talk about in our lectures, which are usually given by Deanship of Academic Affairs or any other DQA seminars? The thing that is usually talked about is the change of focus from teacher-centered learning to student-centered learning. And of course, my today's focus is going to be based on what is the difference or what change of focus is there between teacher-centered learning and student-centered learning. There is a change of focus, and there are certain things that change when you shift from teacher-centered learning to student-centered learning. So let us have a look at this particular learning experience, the two learning experiences, and see what is the difference between them. Now if you look at this diagram, you can see that the teacher is in the focus while the student is on his desk taking the lecture. But as soon as the focus is shifted from the teacher or the instructor to the student, then you can see that there has been a change that has occurred on the side of the student. Now before that change was made, you can see that the student was just listening to the instructor. But as soon as the focus shifts over to the student is more participative. He is more active in the class. But you might not have noticed this particular interesting phenomena, that it is not just the change that has happened over to the student. There has been a change that has happened to the instructor as well. If you may allow me to get back to this particular slide. Now this is the instructor delivering the lecture. The student is idle. When the shift is made over to the student becomes very active. But of course there are certain other elements or certain other activities that are being done by the instructor himself as well. So it means that this change of focus does not only bring change over to the student side, but it also brings a change over to the instructor side as well. The instructor has to become more active. He has to come up with other different sort of techniques, and he has to come up with different sorts of ideas. So this is why I would rather make a point over here that it is rather a student-centered learning. But this change of role, which is usually termed as a facilitator, or the instructor is usually termed as a facilitator, he has to become really active in the class as well. To make the students active in the class, the instructor has to be active. So the role of the instructor is also enhanced. It also becomes very demanding because the instructor has to go an extra mile and has to make an extra effort to involve the students. So I would like to just go through a couple of points over here what are the different things that the facilitator has to connect with? It has to connect with the participants. It has to connect himself with the content, what he is actually teaching. But that's not all. He's not only going to deliver the lecture, rather, he is also going to connect his participants and, of course, himself to different contexts, different perspectives, and also to the outside world. So it becomes a holistic view which he delivers inside the class, because he has to connect the participants over to the real world, different sort of contexts, because the students are participative and they come up with various sorts of questions, and those sort of discussions and questions sometimes become open-ended. Okay, so this is the role of facilitator, which I had to emphasize on. Now, when I was looking at this particular task of coming up with the presentation, I thought that since the facilitator is going one extra mile, okay, not just one extra mile, by the way, you can say that he has to go certain extra miles to put up the effort, I thought that why not coin a phrase for the facilitator, because he's also doing his job. I mean, he has also to come up with different sorts of strategies and mechanisms to involve the students, because students are never going to be involved by themselves. You have to push them to get involved into the teaching experience. So I thought that, it's a very well-known saying that teaching is an art, and it has been said by so many people in the world. There's one over here, Mark Van Doren. So this sort of understanding about the teacher establishes a fact. And what is that fact? That teacher is in fact an artist. Because teaching is an art, that makes a teacher an artist. Now, once the teacher becomes an artist, what a facilitator becomes? Because I'm talking about facilitator in terms of a person who involves his audience to enormous extent. Okay, he's different than a normal teacher. So, for a facilitator, a person has to be seriously or highly motivating. Now, the teacher is an artist. Facilitator has to be seriously motivating. What does a facilitator become after this understanding? Okay, do you have an idea? Do you have any idea what I'm going to be coming up with? I'm coining a phrase. The facilitator becomes a smartest. He has to be smart in the class, because he has got the responsibility to be smart in the class to produce smart students. If the instructor is smart, the students who are going to be graduating are also going to be smart. Now, what the students will become then, if it is actually going to be an interactive experience on the student side, what the students are going to be becoming? The students are going to become smart students. Okay? And you can simply say students, because in this particular diagram or in this particular slide, I have highlighted the letter S. And it is not just a student now. S stands for smart. So you can just call it smart student, or maybe you can just call it a student, but that S has to be referring to the word smart. So it means that all we have talked about so far revolves around motivation. And let me tell you one thing, this motivation is not only about the student. The instructor has also to be self-motivated. Because if the instructor is not self-motivated, he cannot or she cannot motivate the students. So an extra energy, an extra mile that I have been talking about so far, he has to go all that long. So today my experience. I'm going to share you an experience of mine which I have actually accumulated over a period of, let's say, 4 years in University of Dammam, teaching various courses over, let's say, from year 1 to year 4. I have taught almost every course except a few in the MIS degree program. So I would rather summarize my experience over 2 dimensions. There are 2 dimensions of my interaction. One is action and the other one is verbal. And I have used some conventional methods that you will find in so many places like websites or other academic material. But I have also tried out some non-conventional methods which I have devised on my own. You will not find them inside any material or any academic website or something. And these activities comprise activities that may involve a group of students or maybe some individual students. The objectives of my interaction have been to motivate self-learning. So it is not only to motivate the students, but it is also to motivate myself. I want to keep my energy going. I want to keep my energy level at higher levels. If I do not have energy, I cannot motivate my students. So I have to be active. I have to be energetic. Then to prepare the students better for their courses. This is another objective I have, to make students love their subjects, especially their major. This is also an objective of mine when I deliver my session. To create awareness about important things in life. Now this is also an aspect which I cover in my class. I sometimes give them guidelines on life, what things are important in life, what things are in fact important in their studies, and so on and so forth. So my class interaction actually transcends, or my objectives of class interaction, I would say, transcend class boundary and course material. So it's not only about the course I have to talk about. I also go beyond the course and guide students and mentor students about different things which do not fall into the category of course material. Now before I go over to my experience sharing, I would divide my talk into 2 portions now. I am going to be talking something about action interaction, and I'm going to be talking about something called verbal interaction. Also, although this action interaction also involves verbal communication as well, but mainly it comprises how the students are acting or making an action inside the class. The first thing I am going to talk about in terms of action interaction is about group activities. Now the objectives are that a group interaction or a group activity has to create peer pressure and accountability. The students, when you see students working in a group, you will see that they have to perform better. Why? Because the others are performing better. So this is an environment that you have to create, and you have to also enforce the group coordination. What should be a learning outcome in that particular respect? They should demonstrate the ability to work effectively as a team or group member. And in this respect, I have done a couple of group activities so far. I am just highlighting 2 of them, and I will discuss only one of them in my presentation. One is the group discussions with roles. So I assign roles, and they come up with certain thing and do a group discussion and submit their outcome to me, and then I give them feedback. This is a very normal sort of activity that almost everyone applies. The other one is a gamified group quiz. You might have given quizzes to your students, or maybe you might have given a group quiz to your students. But I devised myself a gamified quiz. That game was played inside the class, and they played this game within a group. Okay, I would like to go through the anatomy of this particular group quiz in my coming slides. The students were given a couple of chapters to read or prepare from, and they were allowed to use internet, any other course material, or any other reference material. So you can see that the students are studying in group, or maybe they could interact with each other or with one another through social media or any other social means that are available on the internet. So you can see that they are having personal interaction, they are having other sort of interaction. Now, once the quiz, so it is in fact a pre-class activity. You can see that we are not holding a class right now. They are preparing for the quiz. Now, once they come in the class, so it is an in-class activity. The instructor is there. What the student has to do? The student has to leave the group. Okay, the student has to leave the group and come in front of the instructor. So once the student comes in front of the instructor, the question is presented to the students, and the stopwatch starts for 30 minutes. Not 30 seconds, sorry. That's not me, of course. So, for 30 seconds, the student has to come up with an answer, the response to the question which has been presented on the board or through the projector. Now, the student has got two help options. He or she can get the question replaced by another one if she does not know the answer, or she can go back, or he or she can go back to the group to consult, but it is only going to be available once in the whole 2 rounds of the session. So every group has to go through 2 rounds, and in every round 2 questions are posed. So in fact 4 questions are posed, and you can use 2 helplines, only 2 helplines. So there is a pressure. You can imagine the student is under pressure. Why? Because if he or she uses a helpline, it may not be the right question that he or she is using the helpline at, because there might be a very difficult question coming for his or her classmate. So she or he is under pressure whether he or she should go for a helpline or not. Now, this kind of quiz was actually played in 4 sections of females, and I had to go through a couple of challenges, but I would like to first go through what happens after the class. You get motivated students, because there was a sense of competition among all of the groups, and there was a lot of pressure. The students felt a lot of pressure, by the way, because the student had to come over to the instructor and face the question. So this is something which creates a lot of pressure, and of course you have to give students pressure to perform well. Now, the students were given survey, and I collected some data, and that was not all. I mean, the results of the survey were very encouraging. By the way, the students really liked the idea, because that was a very new experience. And of course, the students said to me it actually put them under a lot of pressure. But that was not all. I used that data, analyzed it, and I came up with a research paper. And I have already published this, and the second paper is already in the pipeline. So it means that this activity did not only create motivated students, or did not transform students into motivated students at all. It also transformed me into a motivated instructor, because I also produced something out of it. And that was a very positive side of that I came up with a research paper and published that. Now, what were the challenges? The challenges were that I had to deal with 123 students, 4 sections. And I had to play this quiz in each and every section, one after the other. And of course, if you play one quiz in one section, the questions that are you showing to the students are going to be out. So the challenge was that I have to deal with a number of groups in each and every section with no repetition of questions. And of course, I was under pressure as well, because I had to achieve the intended learning outcomes about the accountability and things like that. The students were supposed to go under pressure. Now, let me introduce you to something called round of claps. Okay, and this is about individual participation. I told you something about group participation in my previous discussion. Right now I'm going to talk to you about something called individual participation. And I came up with this idea because you already know when you pose a question, somebody gives the answer, you clap in the class. That's not a very uncommon thing, very common thing. But I devised an idea. I said, why not clap in a different style? And usually there's a round of applause in a normal fashion. I call this round of claps, and it is something which is different than normal claps. What was the objective? Before I go and actually make you listen to the round of claps, I have actually come up with a demo, and I would like to make you listen to this round of claps. And you will see that how much energy it creates in the class. Now, the objective was to encourage individual class participation. So because you are not only supposed to create group coordination environment inside the class, but you have to also encourage students to participate individually in the class. What was the learning outcome I was looking for? Demonstrate will to perform well as individual as well. So this round of clap, let me just do a demo for the round of clap that was carried out for Reem Al-Ghamdi. She won a Star of the University Award from University of Dammam. So it was a celebration. So I'm just willing to make you listen to this. Is it clear to everyone? So you can see the energy going on inside the class. Were you able to listen to it?
We feel the energy.
So you can see that it was a lot of energy, and we dissipate a lot of energy inside the class. And it is for everyone that participates and gives a correct answer throughout the semester. What was the idea? The idea was that every student is encouraged to collect these points. I mean, you go to a shopping center and you collect points, right? You have got a Shukran card or something like that. So why not collect round of claps? Now once these round of claps are collected over the period of time, there was a surprise which was supposed to be there for the students. I did not tell what I was going to do, but I told them it's not going to be marks. It's not going to be any bonus, because I wanted to encourage them for participation without thinking of any marks. Because right now the psyche of the students is that they are always looking for marks, extra bonuses, and they approach the instructor, please give us 5%, 2%, or anything you like, please give us a bonus. Now the thing is that they have to collect these round of claps over the course of the semester. Now you can see that this round of claps takes maybe half a minute for a student. Only half a minute. You say round of claps for whatever, let's go, and then the students clap for, let's say, only 10 seconds. Now the total thing takes about hardly half a minute. So you can still make a lot of difference in the class, the energy of the class, by these little sort of things. Now you can see that this is a table that I managed to maintain throughout the semester. There are students. These are the students who have collected some claps, okay? And the outcome was a surprise, because I told them that please no bonuses. And the surprise was that I came up with this certificate. I gave them the certificate. I distributed this certificate at the end of the semester, and I said that this is going to be a memory for you, because you have done really well inside the class, and you have collected these points, just like you have redeemed your Shukran card. Okay, inside your shopping center you go, you redeem it. Okay, so for example, this is to appreciate a student name for winning 3 rounds of claps or 4 rounds of claps in the semester. What was the student feedback? Because it might not be so attractive to some of you, but it really made a difference. The students came up with this feedback. It motivated them, and it made a huge difference in the whole dynamics of the class, and they were always eager to participate, because there was a little bit of competition that was created with this small thing. Now, the other thing that I am going to talk about very briefly is something called fun revision. You can have a revision inside the class, but you can make it like a fun revision. You can play very simple games that I usually come up with. I usually devise my own games, very simple sort of games that they play maybe once in the entire semester, because you already know we have got different things to do inside the entire semester. But at least, let's say, let's play a game with the entire class once in an entire semester. And maybe it could be done with a fun revision, okay, or at the time of the revision. So the game-based. And by the way, these are some of the techniques which have already been used on the international level. I have seen papers playing different sort of games inside the class. And the next paper which I am talking about, I'm not going to talk about, by the way, that I referred to, which is in the pipeline, is also about gamification of class activities. Now, I wanted to give a personal touch to this particular game experience. I thought, okay, everybody applies. I created an invitation card. Okay, before the students came over to the fun revision, the previous evening, okay, of the fun revision session, I created an invitation card, and I sent over to the students. Now, of course, I mean, it was a really big surprise for the students. Instructor sending an invitation card to the students for an activity, and that was designed. Of course, that was designed by me, and I put a very interesting poem. I mean, it was defining the event. Okay. For example, dear students of 309. 309 was a course. 3 year students of 309. Come on, let's have some fun time. Your exam chapters will be revised. The way you are going to be surprised. If you participate with whatever you studied, then for exam you don't have to be worried. Learning with fun is my philosophy of teaching. I wish my message is far-reaching. So, by the way, the mails which I got after sending out this invitation card were amazing emails. Like they were saying, like, we cannot wait, doctor. I mean, fingers crossed and things like that. Thank you very much for this sort of invitation, and this is a very new thing for us, and different sort of things that you can imagine, of course. Another, just an example. I mean, this was another one which I did for another group. Okay, for example, do some action and rejoice. It's a unique way to revise. There were certain other poems. So for each and every event, I tried to come up with a different poem. So it was another invitation card. So it really engaged the students. It made their motivation, or it took the motivation of the students to the next level up. Now, let me talk about something called verbal interaction. Whatever I've talked about so far was related to action interaction. Now, verbal interaction, what I usually do in the class verbally to engage my students. One of them is the open discussions. Of course, we have lectures and normal sort of discussions going on inside the class, which every instructor does. But in my class, there are certain things which are discussed openly, like in terms of open discussions. For example, I talk about community service. When the students are supposed to graduate, they need to give something back to the community. They need to understand that what is the importance of community service. And of course, that is regarded to be one of the most important things in all over the world, that the students are supposed to graduate and they have to give something back to the community. They have to connect themselves back to the society. I have to tell them that you have to keep calm, by the way, and study hard. Do not come to me for always like begging for grades and things like that. We have to change the psyche. By the way, this is some of the discussion we made earlier in one of the seminars, that we have to change the psyche of the students. The students are always looking for an A+. That's not a bad thing, of course. It creates competition, but of course at the same time we have to make them realistic. We have to make them feel the pressure. We have to challenge them. It's not like that A+ can be secured very easily. No, that's not the thing we are going to be promoting here. So I have to talk to them about it, how they can connect themselves with different experiences in life. Connections, making connections with different sorts of examples. Whatever I'm talking about, even in technical terms, how they can be connected to their real life, or different sorts of perspectives. And the other thing which is rather interesting, that sometimes, maybe once in a semester, twice in a semester, maybe hardly once in a semester. I do a session, very small session. We do poetry. We just read poems together, and it's in chorus. It's in chorus. Now you can imagine that then they read, and these are motivational poems. They increases the motivation of the students. And by the way, when the students repeat after you, again it's a source of self motivation for me, because they really like it. I mean, it's like a chorus going on inside the class. That's why I say again, I make my points again, I assert it again. My class interaction transcends class boundary and course material, which is something which I talked about earlier as well. Now, how I started with the poems, by the way, I'm just trying to just make a point over here that I wanted to do a revision in the class. I was teaching a DBMS course, and I thought that what should I do as a unique thing to do a revision, because I was not actually satisfied with doing the revision the same way. I said, I have already given the lecture and I'm going to give them another lecture on the revision. I mean, I was not satisfied. I mean, this was just a sort of dissatisfaction, or maybe looking for something different. Now, once I thought that, I would say, no, I'm not going to repeat repeat the chapter in the same way. I'm going to do another thing. And then I started thinking about the idea. And then something came into my mind. Why not write a poem about my chapters?
He will write a poem to you in the exams.
So you can see that certain things are underlined. It means that these things are important in the poetry. I mean, in the lines of the poetry, these are some of the things. For example, in architecture is being talked about. What is a database? To manage data, you need a place which is called a database. I mean, a very, very simple sort of definitions which are there inside my poetry. And the students really liked it, because we again did it as a chorus inside the class. Now, this was the starting point, by the way. This was back in January 2014. That was the starting point of my poetry. I'm emphasizing this right now. Why? Because this has changed my life. Why? Because after that, I started writing poems. And I became a poet. I mean, so what I'm trying to emphasize over here, that sometimes you do not know what kind of things you can do in life. But all you have to do is to make an extra effort. Once you do an extra effort, it can open up new ways for you. And after that, January 2014, and by the way, I wrote this poem in a transit lounge of Doha airport, because that was a mid-semester break and I was traveling back to Pakistan, and I had already thought about that I would write a poem, but I was not having some time to write it. So I wrote it in the transit lounge. So 2 poems were written for 2 chapters, and they were well taken by the students. So one of the poems inspired by my students. So some of the poems I write are inspired by my students. And one of them is The Lamps of Hope. Let me tell you why I wrote this poem. Some of my students, and some of my really good students, perform really bad inside the midterm. They were very sad. Of course, when the students do not perform well, students become sad. And I also become sad. Okay? So I also became sad at that time. And I said, okay, let me write something good for my students. So I said, okay, I'll write a poem called Lamps of Hope. Okay? And then I gave it to my students to read. By the way, this picture has been taken by my students and sent back to me. You can see that beautiful lamps burning over here. What does this indicate? It indicates that the students really like that. And they really appreciated this effort, because that was really very unique, and it actually boosted their morale. It boosted their motivation to really perform well. And what happened, by the way? What happened? And once I also read this poem inside the class with lamps burning inside the class. So I went with lamps burning inside the class. I made them burn inside the class and read this poem with them. Now, what happened in the final exam? I was talking about the midterm, right? They really performed bad in the class. Okay. In the final exam, they were holding lamps of hope inside in the palms. Okay, and of course it's a sort of imagination. Of course, they were really holding lamps of hope in their palms. Another thing, this has gone an extra mile. We came up with an MIS anthem. There is an anthem of our department, MIS anthem. We performed this anthem that was recorded with my students, and that was performed. Dr. Khalid was there, and some other colleagues were there, and it was performed with this whistle and claps. Okay, and then I went an extra mile last summer. I went to my schoolmates because we used to do some stuff like doing songs and things like that. When I was in the university, I said, I've written something, let's do a song with this anthem. They were really surprised that, because usually songs are not of that kind, but we came up with a song. We posted it on the YouTube, by the way. It has already got over 600 views, 650 views, and the students really like that. It's a song, and that's called MIS Love. Now, what is the purpose of this song? Is to make students love their major, is to make the students love their subjects and things like that. So a song, an anthem. So you see, something started with a very small idea to change the course of the revision, change the style of the revision. It made me a poet. It made me come up with different sorts of things that are not usual. These are unconventional things that I'm talking about, and I told you. This is another outcome of the same idea of the revision. This is my book that is going to be available soon. It's in the design phase right now. And by the way, due to this particular fact that I became a poet due to my students, I have dedicated one full chapter solely to the CBA students. In that particular book, I have dedicated one full chapter to them. And by the way, at this particular slide, I would like to thank all of my colleagues, the deanship, and the University of Dammam, who have actually supported me throughout, encouraged me, and they have provided me a platform to perform different sorts of unconventional things in my academic career. So again, I will assert that my class interaction transcends class boundary and course material. It goes beyond that. Now, the last thing which I'm going to talk about, let me just have 5 more minutes. It is a combination of verbal and action. Okay, and I usually do a project celebration. Now, I usually teach courses at final year level or third year level. I have taught courses at lower levels as well, but right now I've been teaching courses at third year, final year levels, and the students are about to graduate. Okay, and the projects they do are really demanding, especially programming. And you can imagine the students who have not ever known programming before in their entire life. They come to this class and they start learning programming, and they come up with a project, a real life application. Okay, so after they are done, by the way, I challenge them, I grill them. Okay, so after that they really deserve some appreciation. So I usually do a class celebration, okay, because the students work hard for their projects and therefore they need some appreciation. And the student feedback about it is that it motivates them and really makes a difference in enhancing motivation. Before the project celebration, I usually come up with an invitation card. This is a poem that I wrote. So with lots of joy, I'm not going to read all of it, but it says, with lots of joy and surprises, rounds of claps and some prizes. This event will also include saying congrats and sharing of food. They also bring some sort of cookies and things like that, and then they share it inside the class. So it becomes a very comfortable environment inside the class. And before they go for the final exam, they become really motivated and their morale goes up. So the name, I usually give a name to my project. Project Impossible. Okay, something like that. Revision. So what do we do in project celebration? We do some sort of revision. We go through some creative activities, award certificates, and we read poems inside the project celebration as well. So that's why it becomes very or very much oriented towards action and interaction, both of them. This was something that was done recently in this semester, and the project name was given as Crazy Waves. Okay, because the students were dealing with the data, and the data usually represent waves, right? I said, okay, let's give it the name as Crazy Waves. And you can see that there's a ship inside, right? I told the students, this ship is your project. And of course, when the ship or a project is in the waves, it actually goes right like this and this. The students sometimes were feeling bad about their project. Sometimes they were really low. Why? Because the project was not working, because the code was not working, right? So it was a kind of wavy situation for them. Sometimes they were feeling good, sometimes bad. So the ship was representing their project. And of course, it was sent to all of them before the celebration, one day before the celebration. Now, what I emphasized in this project celebration, I'm just going to do one single slide on that. Usually, I do some sort of words. I exchange words of motivation with the students. I told the students that the students do a lot of work, but people only see the success, right? So they do hard work, they take risks, they do late night work, they struggle and things like that. Now, if you connect it to your project, then if I represent everything as a wave, okay, everything is a wave. By the way, everything is a wave in this world. You already know if you have studied physics. Right now, this is the latest theory that everything is a wave. Even we are waves. So it means that all the feelings we have are also waves, of course. So if you represent everything with a wave, then the resultant of the combination of all the waves should to take their morale up. They should motivate them to achieve higher. So these were some words of motivation given to the students in the project celebration. I would like to emphasize or focus on one of the activities that is not a conventional activity to do, especially in MIS major, because MIS major is talking about programming and business intelligence. Now you can see there is an empty canvas, right? Empty canvas inside the class was brought in the project celebration. And I asked the students, go paint whatever you want to do, or whatever you want to paint. Just express yourself in paints. Now, I gave this to my students, and then they started painting. I mean, it looks very simple sort of activity, but let me tell you, when an empty canvas is in front of you, empty canvas is in front of you, it's a very difficult job to decide what you are supposed to paint. It's something like you are standing in the middle of the desert, and you do not know where to go. An empty canvas in front of you. What to paint? The students decided something. They made a decision. And you can see that they came up with a very beautiful painting, right? It has nothing to do with MIS, but let me tell you, the comments that I got, that they really enjoyed this activity. It released the pressure. It motivated them. It made them express themselves in terms of colors and actions that they did on the canvas. So, and by the way, that was not all. I'm not going to go into the details of that. That was even more emotional. Okay, but because there's not much time left, I would not go into the details of this activity. I also did something after this activity was over. So my class interaction now transcends class boundary and course material. That's not the part of their course, but one single session makes a lot of difference of such kind. Whatever we do throughout teaching inside the class, there's another idea I launched 2013. MIS, memorable moments, and we call it M3. We collect all these things together, and students keep on accumulating these as memories. And once they go out of the university, these are the memories they take with them outside. So every object, certificate which I talked about, invitation cards, pictures, everything becomes a memorable moment. Brochures, certificates, pictures, any cards, any posters. they all become M3, MIS, memorable moments, and they're posted on the blackboard with a link called M3. All MIS students know it. What is M3? What are the outcomes? The first thing I get from these sort of activities is self-motivation, because I want to go further. I need to collect energy. If I am exhausted, I lose energy, I cannot continue. The first thing which I have put over here is not the student motivation, mind you. It's not the student motivation which I am emphasizing as the first bullet. I'm talking about my motivation. If I am motivated, I can get my students motivated. So, self-motivation, self-development as well. Motivated students. Good members of the society, because I'm emphasizing the students to change their way of thinking. Research, I came up with papers, so it also gave me some incentive, a benefit. Literary work, my first book of poetry or poems, I came up with a book. How it applies to you, whatever I have talked to you, I mean, this could be a question in your mind. It's a very valid question, right? I mean, do you have to do poems? Do you have to do an anthem? No, of course. It's not about writing poems. It's not about painting. It's not about writing anthem or round of clap. It's not only about it. It's not only about it. Because all what I'm emphasizing over here is something called creativity. What I emphasize over here in my presentation and make a point at the end of my presentation is that the world of creativity is still open. Now you can figure out what you are good at. You're not supposed to write poems, you are not supposed to do round of claps. Maybe if you like, you can do that, but be creative. What kind of different creative things you can come up with? There's a well-known saying, creativity is now as important in education as literacy. You have to be creative. And this guy is, by the way, you can listen to him in TED Talks, by the way. He's a very well-known figure, and he talks about creativity in education. In the end of my presentation, I have a little present for you. So, Dr. Arshad, could you kindly just distribute a little token of appreciation for your patience and listening to my presentation? And there is a survey. There's a one-page survey. By the way, this present is a collection of my 3 poems. One is called Yalla. Yalla is an Arabic word, right? But I wrote an English poem on Yalla, and it is also about Ramadan. Okay, and there is another poem which is called 5 Riyals. Okay, and there's another poem which is on technology addiction. We use technology, but we do not have an understanding how much we should use the technology. We waste a lot of time. Our attention is diverted. Our soul is not in a state which it should be. So it is about technology addiction. So there are 3 poems as a gift, maybe Ramadan gift or Eid gift, whatever you say. And a survey. There's a one-page survey. Could you please complete this survey for me? And I would be happy to have your comments, please. And thank you very much, all of you, for your patience and for your listening. Now I am open to any sorts of questions that you might have in your mind.
It should be like this.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.